Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started. People are still joining, and we'll give them a few seconds to do so. But welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Brett Weissel. I am the Global Policy and Advocacy Lead at the Early Childhood Development Action Network, and I'll be serving as today's moderator. Thank you all for joining us on today's webinar. And please feel free to introduce yourselves via the chat. We'd love to hear who's on the call with us. So just a little bit of framing here. We are really excited to host this webinar today with UNICEF, as it is a reflection of a long-standing collaboration that we've had on advancing the development of the pre-primary subsector, especially through the development and promotion of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, which we'll get into in a moment. So over the past few years, we've, with the support of funding from KICS, we've co-facilitated a successful community of practice with 5 countries on their own journey to strengthen the pre-primary subsectors in their countries. And this webinar is a part of that joint effort and an effort to build resilient systems for early learning. In many ways, it's a culmination of that journey. And so today we're going to showcase some new sections of the ECE toolkit that provide new guidance on implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. The team from UNICEF is going to walk you through those in those tools in more detail, so you can learn how you can use them in your own context. We're going to then hear some reflections from the World Bank, from UNESCO's International Institute for Education Planning, UNESCO's International Institute for Education Planning, the Africa Early Childhood Network, and the Ministry of Education in Ghana. We're a bit pressed for time today, so if you do have questions, please enter them into the chat function, and the UNICEF team will do their best to respond to that, to any questions that you have. So to begin, I'd like to turn it over to Divya Latta, who's the Global Early Childhood Education Program Lead at UNICEF, to kick things off. Following Divya, Kristen McConnell, the Thematic Lead for Childhood Education with the Global Partnership for Education, will also share some additional reflections. Okay, over to you, Divya.
Thank you, Brett, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Greetings, colleagues. Really a pleasure to meet you this morning from New York. And as we look at the new version of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, I'm sure many of you have been with us as part of this journey, which started actually almost 5 years ago when we initiated the Build to Last framework for strengthening ECE system that UNICEF had developed. And joining hands with our valued partners, GPE, ECDAN, the World Bank, and also almost 40 different organizations who contributed to this toolkit, the first version of the toolkit was actually unveiled in February of 2021. Thereafter, we looked at some of the gaps that had been already there in the toolkit, but also recognized some of the newer needs and new tools that were available. And of course, my colleagues will be taking you through what are the new additions we are bringing to you today, and hopefully that will be an exciting conversation. I want to just underscore the importance of this whole initiative. As Brett mentioned, we had started with actually 4 countries in the first phase when we developed a Better Early Learning Development at Scale program, and that is a whole strategy that we had for actually mainstreaming or integrating ECE within sector planning. Those of us who work in this subsector know how important and how critical that is to make sure that early childhood education not only gets that stakeholdership and support, but also indeed is considered as a major part of education systems and can play its transformative roles in addressing the kind of learning crisis that we all face on a daily basis today and in the foreseeable future. I won't go too much into the detail of what the toolkit is, because that is what you will hear from colleagues. But I do want to say that over the last 2 years, the wonderful team that has worked on this, Jennifer, Abdullah, Alexis, Wena, and Joa, of course, at UNICEF, but also our colleagues and partners who you will be also hearing from. It has become a very enriched tool. And we have also taken the opportunity to then work with our regional colleagues to share the tool more regionally. And in fact, starting with the 4 countries initially, 5 countries that participated in the next phase under KICS, the Knowledge Innovations Exchange Program. Now we have in more than 70 countries, focal points who are actually able to take this tool and the whole process of mainstreaming ECE in sector planning forward. This is, of course, a living tool and will continue to grow as we curate more examples. We would really like to hear from you, not only after this presentation, but we are hoping after this, you will be looking through the tool, browsing, and also sharing your stories in terms of telling us what works, what doesn't work, and sharing case studies and other resources that we can further showcase on this online toolkit that is available free of cost for anybody who wants to use it. Colleagues have also used it not only for country situation analysis, sector planning, but also for doing some of the analysis within teams, within organizations, to develop country plans, strategies, and a whole range of other uses that have been helpful for them. So we would like to hear from you on all of that, and hopefully this conversation will continue. At this point, I want to especially welcome our partners from the World Bank, the ECDAN, but also IIEP, and also AFCAN, who have joined us for this particular presentation, as well as colleagues from the ministries, particularly from Ghana, who are here on the call, and of course, colleagues who you will be hearing from their recorded messages. We are really happy to bring this to you on behalf of all of us. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Kristin, our valued partner from GPE, who has helped us take this valuable initiative forward. Over to you, Kristin, and a warm welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Divya and Brett. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my pleasure. I wanted to set the stage a little bit with the context of where the toolkit was built upon. You know, this is a process I've been a part of for the past 5 or 6 years. So at the time, right, we really had this critical challenge where education sector plans in early childhood education were sometimes non-existent. That section didn't exist, or when it did, it was significantly weaker than some of the other subsectors of education, right? So then from this, we built this theory of change, thinking about, well, if we really invest in building strong education sector analyses in early childhood education and stronger education sector plans in early childhood education, right? There's more of then this justification and reasoning behind how we can then have more significant investment in improving early childhood education. So this is really kind of the context of where this work all started from. So I remember clearly kind of sitting in a conference room in early 2018, I guess, it was winter time. A number of partners, many of whom are on the call today, were sitting around the room where we were really brainstorming this idea about a toolkit. We knew we wanted to do some in-depth work in a handful of countries and pilot something on the ground, but really we also knew we wanted to create a global good, right? Something that was this living document and a resource, right, and where we can build upon and share various tools that would be helpful to various countries and contexts as they work on improving their early childhood education systems. And then I fast forward, I think about late 2019, when I was sitting in a different conference room. This time it was UNICEF's in New York, where a number of teams who had been really working at this at the country level came together and really tried to think of, you know, how do we make this toolkit really take shape? Kind of what tools would be most helpful for a global audience? You know, and I remember some of the principles of that conversation being, you know, where I think some of the how-to examples were missing. So, you know, this toolkit not only includes the what, where you have like, this is an example of what a simulation model looks like. This is an example of what indicators can be used, But I think one of the things that's unique is it really does the how-to part as well. So, how to put together a technical working group for folks working on early childhood education. What would a TOR look like for its members? And some of those other resources that are really just practical guidance and uses that people can take and kind of use and adapt to their own context. It was exciting to be part of the launch in early 2021. And now, I'm really pleased to be part of this, launch of the expansion here now two years later. Right? So I'm looking forward to kind of new, seeing these new implementation tools and financing resources. And I'm really excited to see, how these tools can be leveraged. It's been exciting from the GPE side to kind of see as countries are developing their partnership compacts, to see how, some of these countries are using these resources from the toolkit to include, a strong focus on early learning within their partnership compacts. So quickly, I just want to say thank you to all who've been part of this journey together in developing this great resource, and a many thanks, especially to all who have been using this tool along the way to strengthen early childhood education in their context. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Divya and Kristen. Just noting the chat function is now working. Apologies for that. We know there was an issue earlier. Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Jennifer Vu, who's the Senior Early Childhood Education Advisor at UNICEF. And she's going to talk about the work they've done to expand the toolkit. Okay, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Brett. Thank you, everyone. Yes, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the expansion process for the ECE Accelerator Toolkit and talk a little bit about the toolkit itself for those who may not be familiar with it. So the ECE Accelerator Toolkit is a global e-toolkit with practical resources to support the inclusion and strengthening of early childhood education in education sector planning processes. Next slide, please. And the goals, and there's two overarching goals of the toolkit. One is to support countries in developing and mainstreaming evidence-based ECE subsector plans into broader education sector plans and budgets, but also to build capacity in basic data analysis, prioritization of challenges, planning and costing for ECE for enhanced overall sector development. And so this is where we think the toolkit can help. It's designed to help countries include and strengthen ECE in the context of these various education sector planning processes. And there's a host of resources that can be leveraged by ECE stakeholders at the decentralized and local levels of government, as well as, of course, national levels in order to facilitate subnational capacity building and program implementation. So next slide, please. And just a quick little timeline as to the expansion process of the toolkit and to expand upon what Divya mentioned in her opening remarks. So in February 2021, we had the launch of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit. Next. And then between February 21 and June of 2022, we use a toolkit in 5 countries, the Kyrgyz Republic, Lesotho, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and Tajikistan as part of a grant from GPE KICS. And we use this time to further test the existing tools, but we also gathered information from the KICS countries and other countries that also use a toolkit about what new tools would possibly be needed in the enrichment of the toolkit. Next slide. So just to jump over to that KICS project, which is funded by the GPE Knowledge and Innovation Exchange Grant and through IDRC, the objectives of this project were to scale up and expand the BELDS approach, that Better Early Learning Development at Scale approach, to produce a comprehensive, flexible, and practical global toolkit that can enable GPE member countries and other countries as well to plan for and implement quality ECE at scale through ongoing education sector planning and implementation processes. So we had these 5 overarching goals, which involved using new countries, continuing to engage with former BELDS countries, identify these context-based innovation levers for optimal scaling of the approach, to amplify knowledge exchange across the project countries and with other countries to foster community of practice that Brett mentioned, and then also to generate global goods, produce and disseminate the knowledge required to scale up the BELDS toolkit and approach. So just a little touch, a little bit about the overall KICS project. Next slide. So going on back to the expansion, so in June 2022, we reconvened the reference group, which was instrumental in helping to develop the toolkit in the first place, to start the process of developing new tools. Next slide. And then so we used between June 2022 to March 2023. This was really when the development of new tools took place. So just expanding upon that a little bit on the next. The toolkit expansion timeline. So this development of new tools was an iterative and consultative process that took into account country consultations, meeting with reference group members, to finalize a list of what tools needed to be developed, what these tools should look like, what was needed out in the field. So this was a combination of resource mapping, where we mapped existing implementation and monitoring evaluation resources, conceptualized around the Build to Last framework, which is the underpinning organizational backbone of the toolkit. And we also reviewed goals and measures of progress for each core function of the Build to Last framework to determine possible tools and resources that may help achieve or implement these different goals and measures. We also leverage country experiences. So in addition to the aforementioned KICS countries, we gathered information from countries who have already begun implementing their ESPs. And we also leverage country experiences to strengthen content in the cross-cutting themes of the toolkit to showcase how these thematic areas such as gender, countries in crisis context, and inclusion have been integrated into implementation of ESPs. And then as I mentioned, we engaged with our reference group. So we had sought inputs from the reference group throughout the way. This included reviewing the resource mapping, identifying any new or missing tools or resources for inclusion in the matrix, in the resource mapping matrix, identification of country examples for potential case studies, and then the assistance with developing some tools, providing feedback on these tools, so on and so forth. And we held periodic meetings in 2022, and we also had some ad hoc meetings with individual members. And through this resource mapping, leveraging of country experiences, and engaging with a reference group, we were able to develop the new tools and guidance. Next slide. And that takes us to today, where we are in May with the launch of this newly expanded toolkit. So next slide. So we'll touch upon all of these new additions and amendments to the toolkit in the rest of the presentation, but just briefly, we revised 2 existing tools, including developing a much more robust advocacy workbook for those who wanted to strengthen political will for ECE and understanding the ECE subsector. We incorporated a new costing simulation model in one of our existing tools, and then we developed 6 new tools, 4 for the new implementation section, 1 in monitoring sector review, and then a final tip sheet in the evaluation section. So we'll go over all of these in more detail in the rest of the webinar today. And next slide. And I just wanted to end with a thank you to all of our reference group members. Without you, this work we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this work. So this is, if I didn't include you, I'm sorry. I tried to get all the logos on here, but this is just a smattering of the people who are involved, the organizations involved in the reference group, and we wanted to just take the time to thank them. And so just briefly, wanted to thank you for listening to me, and we're going to go to a video looking at showcasing the KICS countries and their use of the toolkits. So thank you.
من راهبر تشکیلات جمعیتی اقتصاد و معارف، ما در دوره تطبیق لایحه بیس از اینسترومنت‌های بیس برای اجرای یک قطار کارها و قدم‌های بسیار مهم استفاده نمودیم. از جمله از اینسترومنت‌های بیس را ما استفاده نمودیم برای تجدید نظر نمودن سندهای معیاری حقوقی که با مبلغ‌گذاری سرکسی مسئول تحصیلات مرتبط وابستگی دارند. دوم برای جلب نمودن جمعیت، برای افضلیت دادن به تحصیلات تا مرتبه در بنقشه‌گیری بودجت عائله ها، و سوم برای بهتر نمودن بنقشه‌گیری تحصیلات تا مکتبی در سطح منطقه.
Sierra Leone is just imagining early childhood. Do we have teachers in Sierra Leone? Yes, but we don't have teachers that are trained and qualified for early childhood education. ECE Accelerator Toolkit 2.2 and 1.4 was very useful to us and the technical community. We encourage the government to have a compulsory free 1-year of ECE education for 5-year-olds so that we will be able to walk them through basic literacy and literacy skills for school readiness to primary one. And thankfully, the government have agreed to that. Now, the government has passed into law that every 5-year-old child in Sierra Leone should access preschool education.
The key thing that we have done through this toolkit, Accelerator Toolkit, is a policy framework. Actually, this is the document we are looking for. We know this is a roadmap. We cannot implement the activities and the program of ECD well without this. We are happy, lastly, after 16 years, through this Accelerator Toolkit, we have now developed this, including even a strategy framework, including advocacy framework, and implementation plan. We have done this. We are encouraging other countries who are not in the KICS, because these toolkits or these tool, it's adaptable. You can use it in your country context. I really appreciate, and I'm encouraging other countries to do the same.
As a KICS member country, we have used the costing tool 3.3, which is stimulation model, for expansion of reception classes in Lesotho. I recommend the use of this tool as it is very helpful in highlighting the gaps and all the resources needed for expansion of quality ECE. It works and it can work in any country.
Жалпы республика боюнча 1.118.000 балдар бар болгон болсо, анын ичинен 200 миңге жакын бала балдар бакчасына барат. Калган балдарды балдар бакчасы менен камсыздоо бүгүнкү биздин актуалдуу көйгөйлөрүбүз. Ошол көйгөйлөрдү чечүү максатында биз KICS инструменттерин колдонуу менен мектепке чейинки билим берүү тармагындагы көйгөйлөрдү аныктап алдык. Ал көйгөйлөрдү аныктоо менен бирге биз аны приоритеттештирдик. Кайсынысын биринчи чечүү экени зарылдыгын аныктадык. Андан кийин биз стратегиялык документтерди иштеп чыктык. Стратегиялык документтердин алкагында Кыргыз Республикасынын президентинин жарлыгы менен мектепке чейинки билим берүүнү өнүктүрүүнүн улуттук программасын, бул KICS инструментин башка өлкөлөрдүн дагы колдонуусун сунуштайм.
Okay. Yeah, I heard the word adaptable, and I think that's exactly right. We're going to share a link to the toolkit so you can explore it in more detail. And I hope you take a look, because I think you'll see the adaptability and the practicality of the tools. Okay, next I'm gonna pass it off to UNICEF's Global KICS team, and they're going to introduce the new sections of the tool. Okay, over to you, Joa.
Thanks, Brett. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for everybody that's introduced themselves in the chat. Just so exciting to see just the wide range of participants that we have today, both in terms of technical work, but as well as just geographical location, and just really excited for you all to be with us here today. And so, with no further ado, let's look at the toolkit. Let me just share my screen, and I will then bring up the toolkit. So. Yes, so the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, I'm just going to show you here on the landing page. This is for those of you that are familiar with ECE Accelerator Toolkit. This is kind of the graphic that greets you on the homepage, and you see the different steps of the education sector planning cycle. And for the longest time, for too long, we had this implementation section and this evaluation section in gray because they weren't living sections. But as you can see, we now have the full rainbow of colors through every step of the ESP process. And so we're going to take a moment to, as a team, walk you through some of the, very briefly, give you an overview of the different resources and guidance that we've added to the ECE Accelerator Toolkit as part of this expansion work, with the hopes that you will then take some time on your own to really kind of deep dive and familiarize yourselves with these tools. So, let's begin our journey through the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, starting with section 1. This is a an existing section, but we did add a new resource to section 1 that's working on strengthening political will for ECE and understanding the subsector, which is the advocacy workbook for ECE. And to walk us through that, I'd like to hand over to Alexis Dargakis, our global lead on comms and advocacy for the ECE team for UNICEF. Alexis, over to you.
Thanks so much, Joa. And yes, I'm really excited to share this latest advocacy, the latest advocacy tools and guidance with you, which we've developed under section 1 of the toolkit, which is focused on political will, as Joa said. So through the KICS project and other ECE initiatives, we identified that there was an immense opportunity to meet practitioner demands for more resources, technical tools, and guidance to strengthen advocacy capacity and implementation from the global to subnational levels. So building on existing resources in the toolkit, and informed by our direct work with KICS countries and other partners, we not only expanded the toolkit in terms of evidence generation and knowledge products to inform advocacy, we also developed global goods and guidance on how, as a starting point, partners can develop their own advocacy and strategies. So now let's click to Tool 1.1 homepage. The tool homepage here gives you an overview of the key steps for developing your advocacy strategy and plan. It, of course, features the primary tool 1.1, which is the advocacy workbook for ECE. And this page really lays out the role of advocacy in relation to the other sections and tools in the toolkit and the ECE implementation, planning, and monitoring process. So as a first step in using this tool, this toolkit, you would have already identified using this ECE subsector analysis and some other tools, your key priorities and objectives for ECE in your context. So really this section outlines and provides the tools to plan and operationalize your advocacy in support of achieving these priorities and goals. So it's embedding the advocacy into your planning and implementation. So now let's take a quick preview of tool 1.1, the workbook itself. So the advocacy workbook for early childhood education and its companion PowerPoint template provides a step-by-step guidance and a one-stop shop for the necessary tools and templates for ECE practitioners to define and document the core elements of an advocacy strategy and plan. In each chapter, you'll find an explanation of each of the core elements of an advocacy strategy, a worksheet on the accompanying tool, and a completed example of the tool. So upon completing this workbook, you will have the knowledge and tools to define and document your ECE advocacy goal, your outcome, your stakeholder map and your primary target, the tactics and activities that are needed to influence your target, some key messaging, and interim results setting and measurement through monitoring and evaluation. So this workbook is intended to be used in conjunction with the advocacy workbook companion that I just mentioned. So as you step through the workbook, you'll use the companion and its contained templates to document the key elements of your advocacy strategy and plan. So upon completing that template, you will have a complete strategy and plan for your advocacy that you can take away. So a strategic plan is really critical in ensuring your advocacy is targeted towards decision makers and delivered in such a way that your tactics and activities move you closer towards securing the political will and decision making that's in favor of your programmatic and country goals for ECE. We really hope this tool can guide you through this process to support ECE in your context. And just one more quick note, in addition to the workbook, as I mentioned, there are a range of resources to support and develop your advocacy. These are located on the tool 1.1 page at the bottom. So be sure to please check these resources out for more evidence, examples, good practices. We've got many case studies on there and tools that you can use to further develop your advocacy. And we really look forward to practitioners using these new tools and resources to ensure ECE advocacy really translates to action and the expansion of quality, inclusive ECE systems and services to ensure that every pre-primary age child, wherever they are, whatever their situation is, they have the opportunity to get the best start to their education journey and their life. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Really excited to see how countries will engage with this advocacy workbook. We've already had a few of our KICS countries engage and use it, and I think it's a really powerful tool. So for those countries that are interested in developing national advocacy strategies for ECE, certainly have a look at this resource and guidance. I think it's going to be extremely helpful. So thank you again, Alexis, for that. So we'll just continue now to move our way down. Section 2, which is conduct ECE data policy mapping and analysis, which is very much focusing on the education sector analysis section of the ESP process. That hasn't changed. So nothing exciting new to share in this section, but a lot of great resources here, especially the pre-primary subsector analysis tool, which is a tool that's been widely used in helping countries do a deep dive into their ECE subsector. So I encourage you to have a look at this resource if that's something you're interested in. And now we get to section 3, which is establishing a vision for ECE. You've done your sector analysis, now you're kind of developing your strategy. And one of the sections that we have here is tool 3.3 around simulation models. And to walk us through that, I'd like to hand over to Abdullah Alam, our cost and financing expert with the global team. Abdullah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Joa, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. As Joa mentioned, so 3.3, we had this section already available in the toolkit. The addition is the ECE simulation model. If you click on that, you go onto the tool. And then if you go on to download the tool, at the bottom of this list, you'll see the 2 newer links. One is the second last is the guide for using the ECE Accelerator simulation model. And the last one is the actual simulation model, that is the Excel part of it. But initially, there were some case studies, like we had some examples for cases of countries who have developed those models, and some tips and checklists, etc. But now we have the actual tool and the guideline. Just want to highlight the purpose and the need for this tool. So the model, it estimates the resources that are required for achieving SDG 4.2 targets, and it has an overall time frame of 10 years that it covers, spanning up to 2030, and it incorporates pre-primary education for children aged 3 to 5 years. It is applicable at the national and also at the sub-national levels, so you can have it at the provincial level or maybe a district level if you want in your context. It has been developed using MS Excel because it is not only widely available, but it is also easy to use. The model, it has a number of key features. I won't go into much detail, but just to outline, it shows the yearly projections over the years for enrollment and resources. It highlights the contributions of various education providers. It also includes special education in it. It also covers major infrastructural needs of the system, and also allows for including various education strategies alongside the traditional modeling approach. For the model to work, of course, there are several data points related to population, enrollment, infrastructure, human resource, etc., that are needed for the model to work. And then the policy decisions are also made and reflected in the model in line with the discussions and agreements, of course, between the planners, decision makers, and other stakeholders at the national and sub-national levels. There is also a semantic sheet that allows for renaming various items and categories. So if I talk about the outputs, the model, it presents the projections for enrollment, net enrollment rate, human resources, infrastructure, and financial resources that are required in the upcoming years. And it also provides scenarios for better planning and financing of ECE service delivery through evidence-based decision-making. So basically, on the last sheet of the simulation model, you would see a variety of options to choose from, and especially from an advocacy perspective, it gives you a range of options to go forward in the upcoming years. On your screen, you earlier saw the user guide. So the user guide, it complements the simulation model that the Excel part of it. The user guide, it not only supports the basic use, but also expert use of the model. It allows for easy navigation through the model. It provides a detailed guidance on how to use the simulation model. It not only outlines the step-by-step process, but also provides examples at various steps to explain the terms, and also to show you what a particular term means. Joe, if you can also quickly show a glimpse of the simulation modeling tool. So this is the actual tool. I won't go into much detail of the model. So this is the Excel tool. There is a dashboard at the start that you are seeing on your screen. So it provides you a basic summary of whatever has been done into the model. So any entry into the model that goes into the input sheet. Otherwise, everything is taken care of by the model, so you don't have to worry about all the formula at the back end and how it works. So you just enter your data into the input sheet that is in front of you, and everything will be populated. And going on to the dashboard sheet, you can see all those summarized version of information that is required for the planning. What we have done is that we have developed this model. We also followed it up with dissemination sessions through webinars and conferences, events. We also try to build the capacity of government officials, UNICEF staff, development partners working at the local and country levels, and number of other stakeholders for using this tool for planning advocacy purposes. After one round of capacity building and implementation, we have made improvements to the model based on the expert feedback and country level engagement on the tool. We will continue to work with stakeholders to enhance their capacities and implement the model. And most likely, we also plan to tailor the model to emergency context in the days to come. Feel free to download the tool, use it in your context. I hope you will find the tool easy to use and useful in planning and supporting the advocacy efforts for achievement of SDG 4.2 targets. Thank you so much, and over to you, Joa.
Thank you so much, Abdullah, for that very succinct overview of this outstanding tool. This is something that's gotten a lot of interest as we've been piloting through our KICS countries, et cetera. So I would certainly encourage anybody that's interested in looking at how they could effectively cost national ECE strategies. This can be useful for the ESP process, but as well for advocacy. It's a very, I think, a flexible tool, and would certainly encourage you to discover it further. So Abdul, thank you so much for that. As we continue through the different sections of the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, section 4, where we develop and appraise the subsector plan, we have two tools here. There hasn't been any changes to this section, but now we kind of get to the heart of it with the implementation considerations. This is the new section 5. This is an entirely new section, and I think really something that we put a lot of focus on. There's a lot of talk about sector planning and creating documents, but then it's time for action. It's time to implement. And thanks to all our reference group partners, we thought through a series of tools that we thought could be useful in helping countries navigate this essential part of ESP processes. So the first tool that we have here is a financing guide. And to walk us through that, I want to hand over to Wenna Price, our monitoring and finance expert at the with the global team. So Wenna, over to you.
Thanks, Joa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So as we all know, financing for ECE is highly constrained. With a few notable exceptions, the vast majority of countries in all income groups are falling short of the recommended benchmark of 10% of budget allocated to ECE. So the financing resource guide, which I think Joa is just about to open, it's been developed to support ECE stakeholders to navigate the ECE financing space by providing a consolidated introduction to public financing, innovative financing, and to some of the modalities under GPE's funding model. So we hope that this tool will help stakeholders to better understand the different possible modalities and combinations of modalities that can be used for ECE and how these can be developed to support ECE in your context. So if we just scroll down slightly, this kind of the first section of the tool it discusses kind of mapping out the current sources of funding that you have for ECE. So conventional financing for ECE is often comprised of multiple funding streams that can come as a mix of central, regional, local and international sources, and documenting some of those sources can be a really useful foundation on which you can build. And this section, of course, also discusses the importance of spending efficiently as well as generating additional funding so that all funding available is achieving its maximum impact. So the next section looks at public financing specifically. And of course, this is going to be one of the biggest funding streams for ECE. So as you know, we've got the costing and finance tool to help calculate the cost of delivering ECE in your context, which Abdul has just presented. So this tool considers how additional funding for ECE can be mobilised, and we include 4 recommendations to support the process of mobilising public funding for ECE, as well as some additional reading for you to dig deeper. And don't forget that you can leverage other resources within the toolkit to help achieve public financing goals, such as the advocacy workbook that Alexis presented a few moments ago. Many countries are interested in innovative financing as a way to increase the efficiency of spending in ECE, as well as to attract additional funding, potentially from sources that haven't traditionally invested in ECE. So in the innovative financing section of the tool, you'll see a definition of innovative finance, as well as some definitions of a couple of different approaches, block grants and results-based financing. Innovative financing is an absolutely huge topic, so we've included links to additional reading, and Add Today, Multiply Tomorrow is a report that was released at the end of 2022, and it's got a really useful table which identifies the pros and cons of some common innovative financing approaches. And then finally, for those of you who are active in GPE partner countries, we've included some additional information for you. So as one of the few donor agencies that's dedicated specifically to supporting education, we've highlighted some of the grants available through GPE to support you in your journey to achieving national or subnational goals for ECE. So each drop-down box there provides a summary of the grant. And of course, we provide links to the GPE website and GPE's grant guidance so that you can look more deeply into each of these possibilities and see whether it's a good fit for your context. Thanks, and back over to Joa.
Brilliant, Wena. Thank you so much. So thank you for that overview. Colleagues, I don't think I need to stress the importance of financing within the ECE subsector. We all know what globally we're confronted against in terms of the financing gap. And while it's not the magic potion that's going to solve all our problems, we do hope that this financing guide will help countries think innovatively about how to, in addition to securing government commitment to funding ECE through sector plans, also some alternative structures that could help bridge some of the gaps that many of us are confronted with. I want to myself speak to the next tool, which is our tip sheet on subsector coordination arrangements. I think when you think about implementing plans, coordination is such an essential function of making sure that that happens. There's coordination at the national level between key stakeholders, there's coordination at the subnational level, and then there's the coordination between the national and subnational levels, and those are all things to take into consideration. So through this tip sheet that we've developed, and this is essentially, we've developed this tip through taking the existing guidance around sector coordination and more broadly, developed by UNESCO and our colleagues at GPE, and just really kind of adapted this to give it a more of an ECE lens. So just giving you a brief overview of the tool, this is, again, a tip sheet. We have 6 tips here. They are in a bit more detail. I won't go through them all now, but you can see these are some of the tips for guidance that you can think about as you're looking to implement your strengthened subsector coordination as part of the implementation process of your sector plan. And this guidance is going to help you do a lot of things. It's going to help you identify which key stakeholders you want to have as part of the coordination body, whether it's at the national or subnational level. It's going to also think about kind of how you have a coordination body that can have a complementary stream of work between this national and subnational coordination mechanisms to make sure that they're speaking to one another, that they're complementing each other, and that one is informing the other to inform, ensure strong coordination of the implementation of national plans. And in addition to some of these different tips that we have that we share with you that you can read through, we then have, for those of you that would need to develop a terms of reference, I think Kristen mentioned this, the need for some of these practical examples, these tangible goods that are really helpful, which are the country level. We've developed a list, an annex of sample terms of reference. And you can see these are the different sections of the terms of reference. And When you open it up, what you'll have is some suggestions of potential, for example, here's some suggestions of potential objectives that you might want to include in your TOR. And then perhaps more importantly, without making this too prescriptive, some guiding questions that you want to think about within your country context to make sure that the TOR that you're drafting is really well adapted to the context you're working in. So every different section kind of has that structure with some suggestions and then some guiding questions. And all our tools are often available in Excel, Word, or PDF format. So if you were to click download, you'll see that this pops up and everything that I was showing you is then presented in a PDF document to make it more adaptable, as well as for a Word document. If you want to take the TOR and start with the Word document and adapt it from there, all that is easily accessible. So with that, I will stop there and continue to move forward as we move through our journey through the implementation section. And I will hand it back over to Jennifer to talk us through the checklist for considerations for subnational implementation. Jennifer, over to you.
Great, thank you, Joa. So yeah, moving on with the implementation section. So tool 5.3 is a checklist considerations for subnational implementation. So even if the education sector analysis does include an analysis of regional disparities, it's often deficient in contextualizing the problem at more local levels. So it's important that national education sector plans consider how ECE can be supported at these local levels. And then also in cases where an involvement of subnational levels in the situation analysis proves to be challenging, it's imperative that these results are reported back to these levels. So this is where the checklist comes in. So if you click over to the tool, you can see that we have items in this checklist arranged in 5 sections. So we have analysis, policy formulation, policy costing, action plan and implementation arrangements, and monitoring and evaluation. So for each of these sections, you'll see a variety of items that you can answer. So for example, in this first section, the second item is, does a situation analysis include an institutional capacity analysis that includes a subnational level? And, yes, you can click and move on, but if somewhat or no, you can click on that button as we've done there. And then some additional guidance is provided as well as other tools to possibly reference. And then there's also notes, space for you to include notes relevant to your country context. So looking at the next item, does the situation analysis include subnational actors mapping or analysis? Again, yes, you can move on. If somewhat or no, you click on the appropriate button, and again, you see some additional guidance. And you can answer all of the questions, and then at the end, a PDF will be generated that you can save that has all of your answers as well as the additional guidance. And if you've made an online account, which is a functionality of the toolkit, your answers will be saved there as well. So you can take the PDF and share it with others, or if you create an account, it'll automatically be saved there. So just a brief overview of tool 5.3. And then you want me to go ahead and move on to 5.4 then, instead of talking about that as well. So 5.4 is the last tool in the implementation section. It's this implementation resource guide. And it uses the Build to Last framework as its organizational backbone, which many of you are familiar with in tool 1.2. It's the Build to Last framework is also used in the pre-primary subsector diagnostic workshop, which is a tool 2.2. And strategies and good practices learned from implementation are documented for each of the 5 core functions that you see here in the green, in the inner circle, and as well as different factors of the enabling environment, which you see surrounding the core functions in those light 2 different shades of blue. And this implementation resource guide is intended to provide stakeholders with the resources and tools to assist them with the implementation of the action plan. So now that we've clicked over onto the tool, you see this again, this graphic, the Build to Last conceptual framework, which identifies the interrelated building blocks of an effective pre-primary subsector, and also promotes a systems approach to improving the quality of pre-primary education and access to services. And again, this is what we use as the organizational backbone for the current implementation resource guide. And so in this resource guide, we include implementation resources for each of the 5 core functions, as well as the 4 factors of the enabling environment. So scrolling down a little bit, before I get into the different resources, I wanted to point out that some of the overarching considerations we've also taken into account when pulling together this guide include looking at ECE in the context of holistic early childhood development, the role of digital learning and educational technology in ECE. So And considerations around digital learning and ed tech are also included as appropriate in each of the core functions, and then also looking at school readiness as well. So going back to looking at the different parts of the implementation resource guide, you can click directly on this graphic to take you to a subpage that shows all of the resources. So clicking on curriculum implementation, you see that first there's a short narrative around aspects to consider when it comes to implementing curricula. We continue the cross-cutting considerations that are woven throughout the toolkit and have information specific to curriculum implementation across these different cross-cutting considerations of crisis, gender inclusion, and then also some information around digital learning and educational technology as it relates to curriculum implementation. And at the bottom, you see all of the different resources that we've curated, including key reference documents, tools, and then also some country examples. So going back and selecting another core function such as workforce development, you'll see that how we've arranged in the same way. First, there's that short narrative around aspects to consider when it comes to workforce development. Then again, those cross-cutting considerations, crisis, gender inclusion, information about digital learning and ed tech, and then finally, again, the resources, again, categorized into key documents, tools, and country examples. And then finally, we'll take a look at one of the factors in the enabling environment. So looking at ministerial leadership, again, it's laid out very similarly, except here we only include the narrative, and then we go straight to some key resources, including those key reference documents and examples. And so that's the implementation resource guide. We see this particular tool as being a living document, and we'll update it as new tools and resources developed by our partners become available. So back over to you, Joa.
Thank you, Jennifer. Very much appreciated. That is the implementation section, encouraging you all to take some time and look at it on your own time in a bit more detail. But moving forward, in the name of time, we move on to section 6, which is around monitoring and review. And this is a previously existing section, but we've added one tool, the program monitoring dashboard. And I'd like to invite Wena to pop back in and walk us through this tool. Wena?
Thanks, Joa. So I'll speak quickly to this program monitoring dashboard and the guide which accompanies it. The dashboards, the tool has been designed to help you quickly and easily track, visualize, and communicate progress towards your ECE subsector goals, and also to capture critical budget data. It was initially created to support ECE technical working group stakeholders to monitor and evaluate the implementation of the ECE action plan. However, it can also be used to consolidate and report data for other efforts, such as multi-sectoral government and development partner review processes, to capture data for donor reporting purposes as part of transitional education planning in humanitarian contexts, and more. So what does it contain? So quite simply, it's an Excel template which helps you track and visualize data about ECE key performance indicators and track budget data. So we've tried to populate this with some of the most common indicators to measure progress at child level, teacher level, and system level. But if these don't apply to you, or you want to add more, we have a whole appendix of alternative suggestions for you to choose from and plug in. We've also built disaggregation by factor of disadvantage, and of course you can adjust these to reflect the equity requirements in your context. And we've also included an indicator on children with disabilities. If you click on the planning tab, you'll see that there's space to enter your annual targets for each of the indicators that you decide to include. And then if you click on the monitoring tab, you can enter the actual performance against those targets on an annual basis. So if we quickly return back to the dashboard, you'll see that you get a very nice graph, which compares the target and the actual attainment. And as more data is reported over time, of course, you'll be able to use the tool to easily reflect on trends and patterns. It's currently structured to capture data up to and including 2030. In the budget tab, right at the end, you'll see that you can track planned budget, allocated budget, budget deficit, funds utilised, amount remaining, and percentage of budget used. And then this data is also captured in the dashboard. So I'll just talk briefly about the guide as well. If you could bring that up, please, Joa. So all the information I've mentioned and much more is available in the guide which accompanies the monitoring dashboard. So if Joa is able to open that, you'll see as you scroll through that it's a step-by-step illustrated guide, which is designed to really support you to tailor the monitoring dashboard to your context and to make sure that it meets your needs. And you don't need to be an Excel pro to use this. So it's a really exciting and practical tool, and I hope that that this finds a home in many of your contexts. Thanks, Joa.
Want to thank you so much. And just backing up, so this is, again, I think a very useful tool that's relatively accessible, Excel-based, but not too complex. And we did that to make sure that it was accessible for everyone that would like to use it. So looking forward to hearing how countries are engaging with this tool and how helpful it is. And again, these are all living tools. We're looking forward to hearing from people how they're using them. How are they helpful? What kind of changes could we make to make them more useful? Those are conversations that we certainly hope we'll be able to have with you all as you engage. Lastly, in the coming full circle at the end of the education sector planning process, you've implemented, you've been monitoring, then you have the final evaluation. So very briefly, we've included some guidance around how we can ensure that early childhood education is included in the final evaluation of an education sector plan. This is usually done externally by a consultant that would lead this process. And so we wanted to just talk through or provide some of the things that you could think through, some aspects that you'd want to consider and ensure we're well integrated into this final evaluation for ECE. And keeping in mind that this is an essential step in the sense that this final evaluation will then inform the next iteration of the ESP. The findings that you have is going to lay the context for the new ESA, and understanding that data for ECE is something that so many of us struggle with at the country level. So getting this captured in the final evaluation is really critical. So again, this is available in Word or PDF format. And so if I were to click here, you would have all these guiding questions and considerations easily accessible if you are participating within that final review of an ESP. So with that, and in the name of time, I'd like to thank the whole team for everybody succinctly coming in and sharing some of these different tools. And again, encourage you and welcome you to log on to the website and review these. But at this point, Brett, I will hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joa, and the rest of the UNICEF team. What an amazing resource. I think one of my lessons learned in terms of policy change is, and whether it's from an advocacy point of view or a policymaker point of view, is the importance of reducing the unknowns. And the way you do that is through really methodical planning and analysis. And so a tool like this really can help you do that, and in a way that adapts to your context. Okay, so in the interest of time, we are running a few minutes behind. We're going to have a few partners share some reflections on the tool and the journey to the tool. And so I want to introduce a few of the partners that we work with. First, we'll hear from Ella Victoria Humphrey, who's the education specialist with the World Bank, followed by Kofi Segniag-Beto with UNESCO's International Institute for Educational Planning in Dakar. We'll then hear from George Owino, Program Manager, Africa Early Childhood Network, and Isaac Ataba, who is the Principal Programs Officer, Early Childhood Education in the Ministry of Education in Ghana. Okay, Ella Victoria, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share some reflections. So at the World Bank, we work on a systems level and we work at scale. We support access to early childhood education by providing financing to governments to support their programs. And as access to preschool increases in every region in the world, so does demand for early childhood education financing from the World Bank. And in fact, we've seen World Bank investments in early childhood education double since 2015 as a percentage of our education budget overall. When supporting expansion of ECE, it's important to ensure that we are supporting quality expansion. And systems diagnostics, country-level diagnostics can be a helpful tool to effectively target World Bank investments to ensure quality and guide policymakers in their decision-making process. At the same time, I wouldn't advocate doing a diagnostic unless there's a clear, for implementation that is, unless there's a really clear need or gap. But when done in the right way and at the right time, they can be really powerful to help guide investments and in fact, make the case for greater investments. When clear gaps are identified, as some of the early speakers mentioned. The ECE Accelerator Toolkit is one tool that can support diagnostics to inform implementation. As other speakers have mentioned, it's nice that it's really customizable to the context and you can pick and choose the topics that you want to focus on. And I think this is really valuable, as depending on the country, there might be already information available on some topics, but not others. For example, the costing is something that can be done. Costing is something that I think can be done in many countries in the world and has particular relevance to World Bank operations and financing. There is a tendency to underestimate the cost of early childhood education. And when you underestimate the cost of early childhood education, you don't allocate sufficient financing to it. And this can result in poor quality implementation. As an example of where the costing tool is being used, I wanted to share the example of Pakistan. The World Bank team have been asked by the Pakistani government to provide analysis on what the expansion of ECE services might entail at a national level. To do this, the team is building on the costing tool from the ECE Accelerator Toolkit. And actually, they're working together with Abdullah Ablam, who did a wonderful presentation just earlier, and who put this tool together to help them adapt the tool for the purposes of this exercise. They're hoping with these estimates that they'll be able to engage the government on policy and program reforms needed for various early childhood education expansion paths.
Thank you, Ella. Over to you, Kofi.
Thank you, Joa. Thank you, Brett, for giving me this opportunity to reflect on this important topic. I'm really glad that I'm very glad to share my own view, but also the view of IIP Dakar in this webinar about how ECE Accelerator tool can be used to improve ESP implementation, I mean education sector plans, and especially the learning outcomes, policy formulation, and implementation at country level. As you know, IIP is the UNESCO institute that supports countries to strengthen, to build their capacity in planning, but also managing their education and training systems. We all know that many African countries, including those currently engaged in the GP new operating model, that is, the development of the enabling factor analysis and also the compact preparation. Those countries, they are currently reflecting on ways and means to tackle the learning crisis that countries are facing. And among many reforms being considered in this process, expanding access to ECE is a very key one. In fact, you know that evidence demonstrated that primary schools students who attend and completed preschool are better prepared to learn and or perform better at school, at primary school and beyond, as compared to students who are not lucky enough to attend preschool. So the ongoing discussion, as an example, the ongoing discussion that IIP is having in Côte d'Ivoire reflect how ECE is important to improve learning outcomes for students in Côte d'Ivoire. In fact, the Côte d'Ivoire has clearly identified development of ECE as a priority reform in their partnership compact development process. This is true for Côte d'Ivoire for sure, but also for many other African countries that are most affected by the learning crisis. With this tool, with this ECE accelerator tool, countries now have an instrument that can not only inform their education policy reform, about what is best for the country to put in place, and also the action to get more children into primary school, but they also have a tool that can help them monitor and evaluate that policy and reform. Countries can also use that tool as a key point in their education planning cycle, such as education sector analysis, joint sector reviews, and policy dialogue with partners and civil society. We've seen examples from Sierra Leone and South Sudan, two countries where IIEP has recently worked on or is currently working on to develop a sound education policy with focus on gender and equity. This tool can be used, can be an opportunity to advance countries' gender and equity agenda, as we all know that expanding ECE could free poor rural women, the most disadvantaged population, to focus on more productive activities. So just to say that we are we very much look forward to working closely with UNICEF colleagues in New York, but also in Wakaro West and Central Africa region and East Saro region as well. We are looking forward to working with World Bank and all partners and stakeholders to advance the ECE agenda for a more equitable and quality education agenda in Africa, but also beyond. So thank you, colleagues, for giving me that opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you. We recognize we're a few minutes behind, so we'll keep our final remarks brief. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Brett. I believe that all the listeners together with me acknowledge that indeed this really is a very rich tool. The Africa Early Childhood Network is privileged to be coordinating the AU cluster that is concerned with coordinating early childhood education and development on the continent. And as the coordinator of this cluster, we believe that this tool would be a very useful add to the repertoire of tools that we have to help accelerate ECE. Actually, in the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, pre-primary education has been identified as one of the key pillars on which future learning and training are grounded. And it is, however, a neglected area in terms of both policy and investment. We believe that if the aims for which this toolkit has been developed will be realized, then this neglect in terms of both policy and financial investments will be a thing of the past. What is more, this tool has got very interesting features that can make it amenable to use in different contexts. It is interactive, it is customizable, and it has got action-oriented tools, yes, as we have been shown as we were being walked through the toolkit, plus the additional elements that have been added to it. It is also responsive to the stakeholders with a range of technical early childhood education and planning experiences, as we've heard indeed from the countries that have shared their experiences. So for us, I would think that the additional tools that have been added to the toolkit today will make this a complete package to guide ECE actors at the national and subnational levels to entrench ECE into education sector plans and also thereby enhance their sustainability. So as a continent, this tool provides us with a useful guide for considering the efforts of multiple actors in ECE as a collaboration, advocacy, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation tool, even as we build momentum towards the year 2024, which has been designated by the AU as the year of education. Actually, as one of the presenters from Sudan said, Mr. Sarafino referred to this toolkit as the roadmap that will help to accelerate ECE in Africa, in Sudan, but in the rest of the world as well. So for us, we look forward to, again, collaborating with the actors, with UNICEF, with the World Bank, with the ECDAN to perhaps continue disseminating this tool even at the AU level and even at the country levels with all the partners that we work with. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, George. We'll then hear from Isaac from the Ministry of Education in Ghana. Isaac, over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity given us. And I must say, I'm happy for this webinar, and then I salute all the organizers for this particular program. But then Ghana, hello, can you hear me, please?
We hear you well.
Okay, so Ghana basically has a trending system when it comes to early childhood education. In sub-Saharan Africa, we are the lead when it comes to early childhood education. So before the toolkits, Ghana had developed the ECE policy. Ghana has actually developed the KG curriculum, which of course is driving play-based learning in Ghana. At first, we're actually using the objective-based curriculum. So we were having a lot of guidelines and policies when it comes to early childhood education in Ghana. But when the toolkit was born, I mean, experts came together in Ghana, including officials from Ministry of Education, Ghana Education Service, and other partners. Then we sat down and then
I think we lost you, Isaac. Can you hear us okay?
Hello, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you now.
Oh, I hear you fine, Isaac. Please continue.
Oh, okay. So I started by saying that when the toolkits was born, and then we brought together experts to look at the policy, which has 6 action areas. That is planning and management, curriculum development and implementation, teacher presets and in-service, family and community engagement, child-friendly safe school environments, monitoring, regulation, and quality assurance. These were the 6 action areas found in the policy Ghana had developed. So we tried to juxtapose it with that of the toolkits and see where the gaps were. So what happened was that we realized that we were not strengthening advocacy, and we were not strengthening data collection and then management. So the toolkit has helped Ghana in strengthening the advocacy in the area of the ECE. And then I'm happy that you have added new features that would give us the power to actually drive early childhood education in Ghana. So in the area of advocacy in Ghana, we do what is called budget brief. And I think we basically identify financial issues and then address gaps. We also do what is called right age enrollment, where we bring on board all actors in ECE and then people who are well known, or let's say the influencers in the society, to drive enrollment in Ghana. And then in the policy, we had what is called family and then community engagement guideline, which of course it has been developed to sort of empower parents and support them so that they will know the role and place of them in education. So basically, and also when it also comes to data management, as we speak now, I am so happy that you have added this powerful feature to this toolkits. In fact, we are going to have it as our Bible. We are going to have it as our dictionary, and it's going to help us because only yesterday, Ghana put together a team to develop a national dashboard that would help us to track all activities in ECE. And we are happy that this dashboard that was shown to us has been born. And so we are going to adapt and contextualize it in Ghana. So ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy to be part of this webinar, and we look forward for a proper collaboration. Thank you very much.
Sincere thanks, Isaac, and sincere thanks to all of our partner reflections. Ella, Victoria, Kofi, George, thank you all. I know we're behind. We're going to close now with returning to Kristen McConnell from the Global Partnership for Education. Kristen, over to you for final remarks.
Thanks so much, Brett. Thank you all. I also really enjoyed hearing those partner reflections. And thank you all who have stayed on this webinar a little later than we intended. I promise to be brief here. For me, it's been a joy to be part of this journey, kind of from conception, to the initial launch to now having this expansion of the toolkit, and kind of I look forward to seeing kind of where the toolkit can continue to grow and go next. So if I think back to the launch, I reviewed my notes and kind of looked at kind of 3 takeaways we had as the toolkit was just beginning. And it's really interesting that I think those 3 takeaways, stay true with us right now. So the first was, we have these strong country ambitions to scale early childhood education. That I think remains true. And really that we see, custom capacity building support as this recipe for building stronger ECE systems. And that's really where I've been inspired by the stories today. Is understanding how policymakers and partners, are picking and choosing which parts of the toolkit are most relevant to that country context, adapting those tools as needed for the context, and using it really for that custom capacity building. So it's been really great to hear. Kind of my second takeaway is it's been wonderful today to see the continued strong demand for greater evidence and knowledge sharing about how to improve quality, affordable, inclusive, playful early childhood education for our youngest learners globally. You really saw the thirst of knowledge. It was great to see. I think I counted over 35 different countries were represented, live in today's call. I know many more will probably listen to the recording later, but it's really just inspiring to kind of see that collective demand for this information. And I'm glad that the toolkit's able to really help it fill some of that demand. And then lastly, I've really been inspired by this idea of, the power of collective partnership and collaboration for catalytic change, right? This really has been this collective effort in getting the toolkit to where it is so far. As you'll see, it isn't, there aren't logos all over it, one organization claiming it more than another. This is really kind of a jointly owned effort. This collective tool, and the fact that it's this living document that continues to grow. So lastly, I just want to thank you all. Thank you so much for the team who's kind of put blood, sweat, and tears into making the toolkit to what it is now. Thank you for all of you who are actively using the toolkit. I'm hoping that today's webinar is an inspiration to kind of go deeper into the toolkit, see what has been there all along that maybe is new that you can use in your context now, see these kind of new expanded tools. And lastly, thank you in advance for your help in kind of continuing to make this toolkit grow. Like help us know, where we need to grow even further, where can this toolkit build, what great country experiences do you have, and that resources that, you want to add to the toolkit so that we can use your country experience to share with others. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks to all of our speakers and panelists today. And a final thank you to all of you for joining us. We've seen some amazing comments in the chat, and we hope that you will utilize these new resources and you find them relevant and practical in your countries. In the meantime, stay tuned and for further updates. And again, thank you. Thank you for staying with us a little bit longer than anticipated, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.